My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white when I saw him touching my wife. I should have known it would end like this, but discovering the truth is what I do for a living. I found a first body on a Tuesday, the second 2 weeks later. By the time I discovered my wife's affair, 4 employees from Helix Pharmaceuticals had died under suspicious circumstances. That's what the police report said, suspicious circumstances. Like death was just something that happened to catch them off guard. The numbers never lie. That's what I always told my forensic accounting students. Follow the money, and you'll find the truth. But I never expected the truth to lead me back to Sarah. It started with an email chain I shouldn't have seen. Someone in IT had CC'd me instead of Sarah Keller in legal, a common enough mistake given we share the same initials. Simple spreadsheet stuff, tracking after-hours badge swipes for the security audit I was conducting. Sarah's name jumped out at me. 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday when she told me she was at her sister's. 12:32 a.m. the following Tuesday. 1:15 a.m. just last week. Working late again, I'd asked that morning, watching her apply concealer under her eyes. These clinical trials aren't going to audit themselves, she'd said, kissing my cheek. Her perfume lingered after she left, Chanel No. 5. The same scent that now clung to Marcus Chen's office when I walked in to review the R&D department's expenditures. Marcus, head of clinical research, Yale Medical School, the kind of man who wore tailored suits and quoted obscure philosophers. Everything I wasn't. I'd seen him with Sarah at company functions, their heads bent together, sharing inside jokes I couldn't follow. But I trusted her. 15 years of marriage buys a lot of trust. The badge logs became an obsession. I created a spreadsheet, tracking their patterns. When Sarah was working late, Marcus was too. When she had dinner with Carol, his car would be in the parking garage. I started taking photos with my phone, timestamps, locations, little digital breadcrumbs of betrayal. Dead employees should have been my focus. The mysterious heart attack of a 32-year-old lab tech. The accidental overdose of a senior researcher. The administrative assistant who drove off a bridge. The quality control manager found in his garage, car running, garage door closed. But instead, I was counting the minutes between when Sarah left his office and when she came home, calculating the statistical probability of their encounters being innocent. The breaking point came during the quarterly audit, hidden in the R&D budget. Hotel charges, room service, minibar tabs. The kind of expenses that raise red flags. I traced them methodically, professionally, as if I were reviewing any other account. Room 718 at the Marriott. Every Tuesday for the past 3 months. Charged to a corporate card under a project code that didn't exist. I sat in my car across the street that Tuesday, watching. Sarah's BMW pulled in at 7:15 p.m. Marcus's Audi at 7:30 p.m. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Through my windshield, I could see their silhouettes meet in the hotel lobby. The casual brush of his hand against her back. The familiar tilt of her head when she laughed. I didn't confront them. Instead, I drove home and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon. Then I opened my laptop and began reconstructing the financial trails of our dead colleagues. Every transaction, every irregularity I'd overlooked while obsessing over my wife's infidelity. The patterns emerged like bruises rising to the surface. Missing inventory from the lab, doctor trial results, offshore accounts swelling with payments from shell companies. Sarah came home at 10:43 p.m. Her lipstick was slightly smudged. Traffic was terrible, she said, dropping her keys in the ceramic bowl by the door. The bowl I'd made in that pottery class she'd insisted we take together. Did you eat? Not hungry. I didn't look up from my laptop. On the screen, another anomaly blinked. Large cash withdrawals from the account of the latest victim, days before his accident. You worked too hard, she said, pressing her lips to my temple. I could smell his cologne mingled with her perfume. The numbers never lie. But now I had to decide which truth mattered more. The one that could save her life, or the one destroying mine. That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to her steady breathing. In the dark, I could almost pretend everything was normal. That I hadn't spent the day documenting her betrayal in a spreadsheet. That I hadn't found evidence linking her department to 4 suspicious deaths. That I wasn't calculating the statistical probability of her being the next victim if I exposed what I'd found. The numbers never lie. But sometimes, I'm learning, the truth is the deadliest weapon of all. Sleep becomes a stranger when you're watching your wife for signs of murder. I'd lie there, cataloging her breaths, wondering if they were steady from peaceful sleep or practiced deception. The same analytical mind that made me good at my job now tortured me with possibilities. 3 days after discovering the hotel receipts, I started building 2 timelines. One tracked Sarah and Marcus's meetings against the dates of suspicious deaths. The other documented every lie she'd told me in the past 6 months. The timelines began to blur together like a double exposure photograph. A late meeting here, a dead colleague there. A canceled lunch date, another mysterious accident. The patterns were there, but I couldn't tell if I was seeing connections or creating them. "You seem distracted lately," Dr. Morrison said during our weekly department head meeting. I've been staring at Sarah through the conference room's glass walls, watching her laugh at something Marcus whispered. "Everything okay at home?" Home. What a strange concept that had become. Every room felt like a crime scene now, filled with evidence I couldn't stop analyzing. The phone charger by her side of the bed, always positioned to hide the screen. The growing collection of new clothes she never wore around me. The careful way she deleted her browser history every night. I started sleeping in my home office, surrounded by spreadsheets and financial records. The numbers made more sense than my marriage. They couldn't lie to me, couldn't pretend everything was fine while sleeping with another man. Couldn't possibly be involved in corporate espionage and murder. Could they? The breaking point came when I found the offshore account, hidden under layers of shell companies and dummy corporations. But the transfers lined up perfectly with both the affair and the deaths. Every hotel meeting was followed by a substantial deposit. Every death preceded by a large withdrawal. I threw up in my office bathroom after making the connection. When I came out, Sarah was waiting by my desk. "You've been avoiding me," she said, perching on the edge of my desk like she used to do when we were first married. Back when I found it endearing instead of calculating. "Carol says you've been asking questions about my schedule." Carol, her supposed alibi for half those hotel meetings. I wondered if she was involved too, or just another pawn in Sarah's game. Just trying to coordinate calendars. I lied, closing the laptop before she could see the evidence I compiled. "Been busy with these audits." "Too busy for dinner?" She smiled, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married. Or maybe just a mask she'd worn all along. I made reservations at Marino's. Remember our first date there? I remembered. I also remembered how the last victim had been found in Marino's parking lot, slumped over his steering wheel. Natural causes, the coroner said, just like all the others. Rain check. I managed, my voice steady despite the bile rising in my throat. "These reports are due tomorrow." She let her hand brush my shoulder as she left. The same casual touch I'd seen her give Marcus. I waited until her footsteps faded before reopening the laptop, adding another entry to my timeline. Attempted dinner at Marino's. Possible premeditated incident? That night, I didn't go home. I drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the kind that still uses actual keys and doesn't ask questions. The bed smelled of cigarettes and desperation. I spread my evidence across the stained comforter. Financial records, death certificates, hotel receipts, photos. A connect-the-dots puzzle where every line led back to my wife. My phone buzzed with her texts. 10:15 p.m. Where are you? 10:45 p.m. Getting worried. Please call. 11:30 p.m. At least let me know you're okay. 12:15 a.m. I love you. Each message felt like another piece of evidence. The timestamps tracked perfectly with her pattern of concern, the same pattern I'd seen after each death. First worry, then love, then quiet acceptance of another tragedy. I didn't reply. Instead, I kept working, my laptop's glow the only light in the room. Outside, cars passed on the highway, their headlights casting strange shadows on the wall. Each one made me flinch, wondering if they'd found me. If the next accident would be mine. Dawn found me still awake, surrounded by paper trails and possibilities. In a harsh morning light, I could almost convince myself I was crazy, that I was letting my personal pain corrupt my professional judgment. That my wife wasn't a murderer, just an adulteress. Then my phone buzzed one final time. 6:30 a.m. Fine. We'll talk at the office. Don't forget the board meeting at 2. Lots to discuss about the clinical trial results. The clinical trials, where all the victims had worked. where all the financial irregularities centered, where Sarah and Marcus spent all those late nights. I looked at my reflection in the grimy motel mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, 3 days of stubble, rumpled clothes. I barely recognized myself. But then again, I barely recognized my life anymore. Time to decide. Trust the numbers or trust my heart. The evidence was clear, but the consequences were impossible. If I was wrong about the murders, I destroy my marriage for nothing. If I was right about the murders, but wrong about Sarah's involvement, I might be sending her to her death. The numbers never lie. But as I gathered my evidence and headed for the office, I wondered if the truth would set me free or bury me alongside the other victims. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the main conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows, leather chairs, a view of the city that made everyone feel important. I arrived at 1:45, laptop loaded with evidence, stomach churning with coffee and fear. My hands shook as I connected to the projector. Sarah walked in at 1:55, Marcus close behind. They sat on opposite sides of the table. Professional distance, carefully maintained. But I saw the look that passed between them. The same look I'd cataloged dozens of times in my surveillance photos. "Before we begin," I said, standing as the last board member took their seat, "I have some concerns about the Phase 3 trial results." Sarah's face remained perfectly composed. She'd always had an excellent poker face. I used to admire that about her. "This isn't on the agenda," Marcus interrupted, but the CEO waved him quiet. "Go ahead, Stephen. You've never wasted our time before." I started with the financial discrepancies. Missing inventory, doctored trial results, offshore accounts. My voice stayed steady, professional. Just another audit presentation. The numbers appeared on the screen behind me, damning in their precision. And these irregularities, I continued, correlate perfectly with 4 suspicious deaths. The room went silent. I clicked to the next slide. A timeline showing the deaths, the data manipulation, the hotel meetings. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her hands clenched beneath the table. "That's quite an accusation," Marcus said. His voice was calm, reasonable. "But correlation isn't causation. Any first-year statistics student knows that." "True." I clicked again. Bank records appeared. But money transfers are harder to explain away. Each death was preceded by a large withdrawal from this account. An account registered to a shell company owned by you, Marcus. Now Sarah's composure cracked. She looked at Marcus, just for a moment, but I saw the question in her eyes. The surprise. She didn't know. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent weeks convinced my wife was a murderer, when really, she was just another kind of victim. The affair had been real, but it wasn't about love or lust. It was about access, about using her position in legal to cover his tracks. "These are serious allegations," the CEO said, reaching for his phone. "I'm calling security." "Already done," I said. "And the FBI? They're in the lobby now." Marcus moved faster than I expected. He was across the room in seconds, grabbing Sarah. The letter opener from the conference room desk pressed against her throat. "Nobody moves," he said. His Yale education was gone, replaced by something feral. "I'm walking out of here. Sarah's coming with me. Anyone tries to stop me, she dies." I stayed very still, my hands raised. "The numbers don't lie, Marcus. It's over." "The numbers?" He laughed. "You think this is about money? The trial results were perfect. Too perfect. People were asking questions. They had to go. And Sarah?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Was she just convenient? A way to access legal's records?" "She was meant to be next," he said, after the board meeting. "Another tragic accident. But you had to play hero." Sarah's eyes met mine. No mask now, just fear and something else. An apology, maybe, or forgiveness. I wasn't sure which of us needed it more. "You made 2 mistakes," I said, taking a careful step forward. "First, you got sloppy with the numbers. Should have buried them deeper. And the second..." His grip on Sarah tightened. "You forgot what I do for a living." I nodded toward the windows behind him. "Those afternoon reflections make great mirrors. FBI snipers have had you in their sights since you grabbed her." The red dot appeared on his chest, right on cue. What happened next was chaos. Sarah drove her elbow back into his solar plexus. The letter opener clattered to the floor. FBI agents burst through the doors. Marcus went down under a pile of tactical gear and federal authority. I reached Sarah first. She was shaking, tears cutting through her perfect makeup. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "The affair. I was so stupid." He said he needed information, threatened to expose some legal oversights. "I never thought." "I know," I said, and I did. The numbers had told that story too, once I stopped letting pain cloud my judgment. The irregular timestamps on legal files, the subtle signs of document manipulation, all pointing to blackmail, not complicity. The FBI spent hours taking statements. Sarah's hands shook as she detailed Marcus's manipulation, the slow escalation from flirtation to coercion. My hands shook as I walked them through the financial evidence. Every spreadsheet, every timeline, every photo. We left the office at midnight. The city was quiet, streets empty except for late-night stragglers and early-morning delivery trucks. "I'll understand if you want a divorce," Sarah said as we reached our cars. "I betrayed your trust, even if it wasn't what you thought." "The numbers don't lie," I said. "But sometimes they don't tell the whole truth either. Maybe we start there, with the whole truth." She nodded, tears falling freely now. "Where do we go from here?" I really looked at her for the first time in weeks. Not as a suspect or a victim or a cheating wife. Just as Sarah. Flawed, human, real. "Home," I said. "We go home." The sun was rising as we pulled into our driveway. A new day, new numbers to crunch, new truths to face. But for now, we were both alive, both free, both willing to try. Sometimes, that's enough to start rebuilding.